The United Nations General Assembly voted on the proposed resolution presented by Cuba against the blockade imposed by the United States with an overwhelming majority of votes in favor. In Palestine, Israeli forces killed 150 civilians in the last 24 hours in the northern Gaza Strip. And in eastern Spain, flash floods disrupted rail lines, highways, and swept away all vehicles, bringing about 70 deaths so far in Valencia. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from TeleSUR Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news, so stay with us. In the United Nations, member states voted this Wednesday on the draft resolution against the U.S. blockade on Cuba, as well as the request to exclude the Caribbean nation from the list of countries that allegedly sponsor terrorism. Once again, the World Forum of 193 countries reviewed and voted on the document presented by the Caribbean nation. 187 countries voted in favor. At the same time, Moldova absent, while Israel and the United States voted against the resolution. The U.S. blockade on Cuba has been widely condemned by the world's majority. In recent years, successive U.S. administrations have made it worse, despite the overwhelming rejection of the international community. At the United Nations General Assembly session, Foreign Minister of Cuba, Bruno Rodriguez, gave an account of the damages caused by the U.S. blockade against Cuba, highlighting that Cuba's birth mortality has increased while life expectancy has declined.
The human right to health should be sacred. Cuba is capable of producing around 60% of its basic either adjusted or essential drugs list. In recent years, it has been impossible for Cuba to guarantee this production due to the extreme ratcheting up of the measures imposed against our government. These measures have taken a toll on people's lives. Infant mortality has increased and Cuban life expectancy has decreased.
The permanent representative of Belize in the United Nations stressed the need to stop the U.S. coercive policies on Cuba, particularly its inclusion in the state's sponsoring terrorism list. In this regard, the representative of Angola during his intervention pointed out the trading system integration limitations that the Caribbean nation faces due to the blockade.
The restrictive and discriminatory measures and unfair barriers prevents the implementation of macroeconomic programs and the country's full integration into the international trading system. Therefore, this embargo has severe implications on Cuba's ability to achieve sustainable development goals by 2030, risking the country to be left behind.
United States presidential candidate Donald Trump visited Allentown, Pennsylvania this October 29th after escalation in controversies over Puerto Rico remarks made days before. Former President Donald Trump returned to a majority Hispanic city in eastern Pennsylvania after a comedian at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally sparked controversy by making racist jokes about Latinos, including calling Puerto Rico a floating rubbish island. Trump's most recent rally took place in Allentown, a city where the Hispanic population makes up 55% of the total. The visit was an opportunity for the former president to appeal to Hispanics after different groups called racist jokes made at the New York rally disrespectful. In this context, dozens of Latin American people protested in the streets of Allentown, Pennsylvania, in rejection of the racist comment made by Tony Hinchcliffe, a comedian hired by Donald Trump, calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Pennsylvania is one of the key states to determine the triumph of one of the two opponents in the U.S. elections due to the strong presence of Hispanic residents, 450,000 of whom are from Puerto Rico. In the face of the controversy, dozens of Puerto Rican artists spoke out on social networks, repudiating the comments made by Hinchcliffe and expressing their support for the election of Kamala Harris as President of the United States. In the United States, Democratic Party candidate Kamala Harris delivered her closing statement before the presidential election, urging the country to move beyond violent division to a future of shared responsibility. From the vicinity of Washington Park, the candidate said that for too long, the American people has been consumed with too much division, chaos, and mutual distrust, adding that they must go beyond that for a peaceful future. Harris also emphasized that if she wins the election, unlike former President Donald Trump, she plans to give people who disagree with her a place at the table. In addition, Kamala Harris stated that Trump has spent a decade trying to keep Americans divided and fearful, which is why he should not be president of the country again. In Georgia, the Central Electoral Commission has formally requested an investigation due to allegations of electoral fraud following the parliamentary elections held last October 26th. This request arises amidst escalating political tensions, particularly involving President Salome Sourashvili and various political parties that raised concerns regarding potential irregularities and in the electoral process. However, the Commission maintains that the allegations are unfounded. In a statement, it was expressed the frustration over the intense criticisms and accusations since the election results were announced. The Commission further asserted that the claims seem aimed at undermining its credibility. On Wednesday, Botswana went to the polling stations for one of the most hotly contested general elections in its history. In the elections, the current president of the country, Mokgweetsi Masisi, will seek re-election for a second five-year term, representing the ruling party that seeks to extend its nearly 6 decades in power. The citizens will elect 61 members of the National Assembly, who subsequently will choose the country's president and 609 local councillors. More than 1 million registered voters are summoned out of a total population of 2.5 million and affected by inequality and unemployment. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Palestine, Israeli forces killed 150 civilians in the last 24 hours in the northern Gaza Strip. Local authorities said that the city of Beit Lahia has been devastated due to the continuous Israeli bombardments and blockades. They also warned that the city lacks food supplies, water, and health and communication services. Authorities urged to stop the destruction and also to establish a safe passage to deliver humanitarian aid, rescue equipment, and fuel to the Gaza Strip. In Iran, Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi demanded the United Nations Security Council to impose sanctions on Israel for the massacre of civilians in Gaza and Lebanon and its military interference in the area. During a meeting with ambassadors of foreign countries in Tehran, the Iranian diplomat warned that the Tel Aviv regime is threatening the peace and security of Middle Eastern nations with its war actions against the people. He also emphasized that the United Nations Security Council must act against the insistence of the Zionist regime to continue the war and prevent more innocent bloodshed in Gaza and Lebanon. In this regard, he called on the international community to take immediate and collective action against the flagrant violations of international law committed by Israel. The Iranian ambassador to the United Nations, Amir Saed Iravani, condemned the crimes and blockades committed by Israel against thousands of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
The apartheid regime continued to use starvation as a weapon. For over 2 weeks, all humanitarian aid to Gaza has been halted. The blockade has suspended efforts to deliver essential vaccination and other life-saving services indefinitely. These actions are more than a denial of aid. They are a direct attack on the dignity and rights of Palestinians, an attempt to undermine their fundamental right to life. Gaza must remain whole, and its people must not be forced into displacement or subjected to this calculated oppression.
China began the new round of crew transfer from Tiangong space station after successfully launching the Shenzhou 19 spacecraft with 3 crew members aboard. Chinese state media reported that spacecraft's arrival at the orbiting station 6 hours after launch, stating that the spacecraft docked with the Tianhe core module at 11 a.m. Beijing time. The new crew will conduct spacewalks and install equipment to protect the station from space debris. The astronauts who were already on the Tiangong space station 6 months ago are expected to return to China by mid-November. The Russian Defense Ministry reported that army units liberated strategic territories in the Kharkov region. The Defense Ministry pointed out that the armed forces took control of Kugliakovka after the incursion against the Ukrainian troops. Authorities detailed that Kyiv lost at least 410 soldiers, 2 combat vehicles, an armored vehicle, and a multiple rocket launcher system, among other military equipment. The Defense Ministry added that Russian aircraft, artillery, and strike drones targeted the infrastructure of Ukrainian military airfields and an oil depot supplying fuel to Ukrainian armed forces units in the Zaporozhye and South Donetsk regions. The Ukrainian armed forces reported the military desertion of more than 100,000 soldiers in the midst of the conflict with Russia. The National Security and Defense Council established a goal for new recruits to cover the decreasing numbers resulting from mass desertion and battlefield losses. Although they detailed that there's no exact number of soldiers who left the ranks without authorization, the agency highlighted the increase in complaints due to the forced recruitment of young and adult men. In eastern Spain, flash floods disrupted rail lines, highways, and swept away all vehicles, bringing about 70 deaths so far in Valencia. Over 1,000 soldiers from Spain's emergency response unit rescued many people that were trapped by the floods. In this context, the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez chaired on Wednesday a crisis committee at the Moncloa complex to gauge and manage the situation. Authorities advanced the death toll is likely to rise and urged people to stay at home since roads are destroyed and blocked with fallen trees and wrecked vehicles. In China, authorities registered 7 people dead after Typhoon Trami hit the southern island of Hainan. Emergency forces reported that due to the strengthening of the storm in several parts of the region, more than 50,000 people were forced to evacuate, and in this regard, the Ministry of Water Resources warned that floods could intensify on Wednesday. Rescue teams are carrying out level 4 relief operations focusing on residents trapped by the flooding of rivers. Meanwhile, in the province of Taiwan, authorities prepare to face Storm Kong-ray. The storm reached the category of super typhoon with wind gusts exceeding 230 kilometers per hour. Storm Kong-ray passed through the Philippines, leaving 125 dead and affecting more than 7 million people. It is expected to continue its path towards mainland China. We have a second show break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our latest stream on YouTube at TeleSUR English, 2 p.m. Caracas time, the best of TeleSUR English, the most important pieces of news and stories of the day in a dynamic summary. Remember, 2 p.m. Caracas time on our YouTube platform. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The Argentine government announced this October 29th that fuel prices will rise by at least 4% from November the 1st. It was also reported that the value is defined taking into account the rate of crawling peg applied by the central bank and the tax component to match the movement of the official dollar, which rises monthly by 2%. Moreover, it is estimated that petrol and diesel prices will be adjusted by an average of 4%, although there may be some items with slightly higher increases. This increase is related to the movement of the exchange rate and the rise in the international price of oil. Following in Argentina and amid a national transportation strike, different social movements and unions launched their plan of struggle in protest against President Javier Milei's policies. On Wednesday, planes, trains, ships and trucks were out of service in the country due to the struggles of the different social unions as a result of the worsening of the economic crisis. The transport strike is added to other measures of force that are being carried out by the different social sectors that are victims of the economic model of Milei. The protest on Wednesday and on Thursday will give continuity to the mobilizations of the state workers, where they denounced the closing of the negotiations by the national government after barely increasing the minimum salary of this sector by 1%. In Brazil, the trial of those involved in the murder of Councilwoman Marielle Franco and her driver began after almost 7 years without justice. The Rio de Janeiro Public Prosecutor's Office will ask the jury to impose the maximum sentence of 84 years in prison against the suspected perpetrators of the crime, Rony Lessa and Elcio Queiroz. The Marielle Franco Institute described the trial as a decisive moment in the search for justice for those who, like Marielle, fought against the abuse of power in Brazil's poorest neighborhoods. The murder of this political activist, which took place on March 14, 2018 in the city of Rio de Janeiro, unleashed a wave of protest across the country and shocked the international community, who for years have been demanding justice. In Peru, in the context of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit and in the face of a 72-hour strike, President Dina Boluarte asked Congress to authorize the entry of foreign military troops. The administration said that this would help to preserve security through the summit. The Boluarte government emphasized that planes, helicopters, weapons, refueling trucks, as well as various support equipment for planes and helicopters would be brought in. In addition, the project allows for the arrival in the country of 600 military personnel from the United States Army, Air Force, and Marines, who will be deployed to Lima, Pisco, and Chiclayo. And in other news from Peru, the transport unions joins a 24-hour strike for the closure of the Xalapalca prison. The transport union mobilizes to condemn the central government's intention to expand the Xalapalca prison. Also, the carriers urge the radio taxi companies not to charge them for the use of the radio frequency, since they want all taxi drivers to be able to participate, as they are one of the sectors most prone to be assaulted. On the other hand, they demanded police presence and more security cameras to avoid cases of assaults and robberies against cab drivers. In Puerto Rico, given the failure of the privatization of the electricity service, the Union of Electrical and Irrigation Industry Workers proposed on October 29th the restructuring of the public corporation. The organization's president, Gualberto Rolón, said that in view of the failure of the United States companies Luma Energy and Genera PR, the time has come to reorganize the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, moving towards a system that abandons the use of fossil fuels while ensuring an accessible service for all. The unionist pointed out that the privatization of electricity system has led to an extremely costly operation, which has resulted in a much higher bill and a deficient and failed service quality of modernization of the system. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.